eczema is rarely isolated and it's really part of a larger inflammatory pattern,
Yeah,
correct?
they call it the atopic triad. So I typically like to say, think of them as cousins that, show up to a barbecue. You might have all of them show up or just
Yeah.
one of them, and they might show up uninvited.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes. So typically, if someone has eczema, they will have one of the others, asthma or allergies. Sometimes it can be isolated, but very rarely.
Welcome back to another episode of Demystifying Cosmetics. What if I told you eczema isn't really a skincare problem? It's an immune barrier disease that happens to show up on the skin. And most of what the beauty industry calls gentle or sensitive completely misses what eczema patients actually need. Millions struggle chronically, misinformation is everywhere, clean isn't always safe, and fragrance debates are often oversimplified. And trust matters more than trends. So, what actually works clinically and formulation wise when the barrier is compromised? To help us navigate this conversation, I'd like to welcome our guest, Jemila Alharazim, a practicing physician assistant, also known as a physician associate, and brand founder and CEO of Ocean Olive, a skincare brand focusing on eczema care. Welcome, Jemila.
Thank you so much, Jennifer, for having me. And I am the founder of Ocean Olive, which is a natural microbiome and baby-friendly skincare brand for eczema-prone, dry, and sensitive skin. We have one SKU, which is the whipped gel, which is a natural alternative to topical steroids for the management of eczema.
Awesome. And we'll dive into the product a little bit more and kind of how you determine efficacy. But I will also note that it has a very different color to it as well, does it not?
Yes, it does. It has a rosy hue or pink color to it, and that is not a dye. It is vitamin B12, um, which helps with inflammation.
Sure. Wonderful. So let's get into a little bit about your occupation as a PA and kind of how that played into a little bit of how you started developing the product and ideas around the brand. So in real clinical practice, what does eczema actually look like beyond quote unquote dry skin?
Yeah, so eczema typically looks like scaly, rough patches. Common areas can be in the folds of the arms, behind the knees, also behind the ears, in babies and toddlers on the cheeks, but really anywhere. It can be anywhere that is irritated. And we talk about that itch scratch cycle. So the more you scratch it, the worse it gets.
Yeah. And how often is this connected to broader atopic diseases, including and up to allergies and asthma?
It is very connected. So most people are probably wondering, well, she works in asthma and allergy. What is she doing formulating an eczema skincare brand?
Yeah.
Well, eczema fits right in. Asthma, allergies, and eczema are under the same umbrella of atopic diseases. And if anyone in the family has any one of those three, more than likely the child will as well. And so we see a lot of eczema patients in asthma and allergies. We don't only take care of asthma and allergy, we take care of the skin as well.
Yeah. So eczema is rarely isolated and it's really part of a larger inflammatory pattern,
Yeah,
correct?
they call it the atopic triad. So
Yeah, okay.
I typically like to say, think of them as cousins that, show up to a barbecue. You might have all of them show up or just
Yeah.
one of them, and they might show up uninvited.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes. So typically, if someone has eczema, they will have one of the others, asthma or allergies. Sometimes it can be isolated, but very rarely. Food allergy, actually, eczema, if someone has severe eczema, that puts them at risk for food allergy as well.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that.
Yes.
And so when you talk about these triad symptoms, they're not causative, right? So you can't necessarily say, well, I'm treating asthma so they won't get eczema, correct? It's a larger inflammatory pattern that each is really like you're treating the symptoms of each versus you can't just treat the symptom of one.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Correct. However, with food allergy, if you treat the eczema, the likelihood of developing the food allergy decreases.
Oh, interesting. So then it becomes much more critical to have support in early infancy, adolescent.
Correct. Correct.
Okay. All right.
Correct.
I don't know if that yeah, that is actually very new to me, surprising. um and a lot of times when people, especially in the cosmetic industry, think about eczema, the very first thing that comes to mind is this impaired barrier function. Um
Yes.
so when we talk about that impaired barrier function, what does that mean day to day?
So let's talk about what an impaired barrier is. So imagine a house with walls, okay? The walls are the barrier, right? So the barrier is supposed to keep the outside world out and the inside world in, right? So the walls
Mm-hmm.
keep everything in and everything that's supposed to be outside out. However, in eczema, the barrier has holes in it. So imagine the walls having cracks. So now you have outside elements coming in, right? And then also moisture leaving out of the skin. So the barrier is supposed to keep moisture trapped in and irritants out of the skin. And so in eczema, we have transepidermal water loss, so water leaving out from the skin, and so that's where the dryness comes from. And then you have now a vulnerable barrier where irritants can come in. So common irritants would be fragrances, dyes, even pollen.
Hmm.
So you might notice, or some patients might notice, oh, my eczema worsens in the springtime or fall.
Yeah.
That could be tree pollen allergy, could be ragweed pollen.
Yeah. And you touched upon fragrances and dyes, but given the compromise to the skin barrier and for allowing the exposure and allowing other irritants to get in, can have you observed also non-irritants, so everyday ingredients, so a tolerance change
Yeah.
almost?
So fabrics
Hmm.
for one, you know, polyester, wool, those can be irritants. People often tend to have their eczema worsening in the wintertime when the air is cooler and dry, or summertime when it's hot. So sweat can even be an irritant, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And so let's go a little bit more into the fragrance realm. And I think fragrance, we've had a few guests on previously who've talked about fragrance and how it's almost this dirty word, right, in cosmetics, because it's all encompassing, right? And it is
Yeah.
often treated as a blanket villain. But is there some nuanced truth to tease out of, when we talk about fragrance being, potentially exacerbating some of the symptoms of eczema, such as the itching and discomfort? Is there something the nuanced truth in terms of, well, actually it is also more related to fragrance allergens, so certain components of fragrance that are more irritant than blanket quote unquote fragrance?
Yeah, so that's a difficult one,
Yeah.
right? Because in order to really know what the component is, you would need to get a patch test, which
Sure.
is a test that kind of determines what exactly it is that you could be allergic to if your skin comes into contact with it, causing a contact dermatitis.
Yeah.
And so that's why we just say put a blanket term fragrance, because most fragrances are indeed irritants, right? And
Yeah.
so with the irritant on the skin, that causes the itch scratch cycle again. So you start itching, then you go to scratch it, and then you have the redness and inflammation.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I believe, I'll have to revisit this, but a long time ago, I really got stuck in how fragrance allergens were determined, right? And it is largely based on a population of healthy individuals, right? It does not take into account compromise, like people with eczema,
Mm-hmm,
that
mm-hmm.
actually, you know, as we spoke about, they're even seeing changes to things that are benign on good days, let's call them, right? When you're
Right.
not having compromise barrier. And so the
Mm-hmm.
reality is that there could be lots of components of fragrance that are not allergens that could be causing the itch scratch cycle, right? Or
Right,
leading
right.
to increased itch scratch cycle.
And it's just easier,
Yeah,
like, to say fragrance free, go
sure.
fragrance free, so that you're not having to, because once you're in that cycle, it's
Yeah,
hard to get out of it. So what I typically tell patients, if they are gung ho on trying something, let's get the skin clear first. So go fragrance free and then add one thing at a time, right?
yeah,
So
yeah,
add one thing, try it for a week, at least a week, to see if your skin can tolerate it. Maybe even 2 weeks to see if your skin can tolerate it. And if your skin can tolerate it, then that's okay. It's okay. I have eczema myself. There are a couple of things that I use that have like a mild fragrance, but again, I tried everything like for a week or two at a time to see if my skin could tolerate it.
yeah. So it becomes something of a cumulative exposure versus a one and done, right? That there's a frequency and a cumulative exposure that needs to be accounted for when understanding how compatible a product
Right.
might be.
So there are different types of reactions to the skin, and there's what's called a delayed hypersensitivity reaction. So yes, you could use a product day 1, day 2, day 3 and you have no reaction, but maybe day 7 you have a reaction.
Yeah,
So that's why I always tell patients, hey, if you're trying something, try it at least for like daily for like a week or two to see if your skin actually can handle it. You could
yeah,
also do a patch test where you take a little bit of the product, you put it on your wrist, and then you put like maybe like a band-aid over, not
yeah.
even a band-aid, but maybe like
Something
gauze with
occlusive.
paper
Yeah,
tape,
yeah,
something
yeah.
occlusive, and keep it on there for about 3 days to see if it reacts.
Yeah. And even thinking about, the industry standard RIPT, the repeat insult patch test, right? There is that period of time that you forego putting the product on and then you reintroduce it to understand if you do have an inflammatory reaction, right? Not dissimilar to kind of like vaccines, right? Like you're exposed to it and you create a defense and then if re-exposed, right? So okay. And what gap did you see in clinical practice or even just trying to treat, on your own? I think you mentioned you also have a child that has eczema.
Yes, my son does have eczema.
Yeah. So, in, looking at care for him, care for yourself, what did you see? What gaps did you see that really pushed you to build Ocean Olive?
Yeah, so I've been a PA now for 17 years, and I'd always have parents specifically asking about eczema treatment. Is there a natural way to, calm the eczema? And I
Yeah.
would just say no and write the prescription for the topical steroid. Well, there's a fear of applying topical steroids because
Yeah.
of the long term side effects, such as thinning of the skin, discoloration of the skin. And at the time, so I started building Ocean Olive in 2021. There was a non-steroidal um, option for eczema. However, it burned when you
Mm,
applied it, and in some cases, it wasn't that effective.
yeah.
And so I started building. I thought, why not create a gentler option to topical steroids that could be fun to use because of the color
Yeah.
and doesn't burn when you apply it. And instead of parents saying, come on, let's apply your eczema cream, the kids are actually asking for it. Where's the pink
Yeah.
stuff, mommy?
Yeah. And we spoke earlier about this and how there are kind of biologics and prescriptions that are available. What is the approach outside of topicals that right now is the standard of care for eczema? Is there something in terms of reducing that immune response? What are the current alternate cares and where they fail?
Right. So we'll talk about it from like mild, moderate, severe.
Sure.
So from a mild perspective, skincare really is, what we talk about. Using everything fragrance free down to the detergent. Okay. Making sure you're moisturizing once to twice a day to keep that moisture locked in, reduce the transepidermal water loss, and then reduce exposure to known triggers or irritants. So, not wearing the wools or the polyesters, right?
Yeah.
If you know that heat is a trigger, keeping cool. For children when they're swimming, using an occlusive as a barrier when you go into the pool because the chlorine can be an irritant, and then washing off right after, and then reapplying the moisturizer. So mild, it all boils down to yes, a proper skincare and making sure your detergent is fragrance free.
Yep.
More moderate, there are the topical steroids, right? Where does the whipped gel Ocean Olive fit? Can be mild to moderate. Okay. So mild to moderate. So I typically say it is the first thing that families grab at the sign of irritation. It is an anti-inflammatory. So it also helps with even mosquito bites, bug bites.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So mild to moderate. If you're using it for 1 to 2 weeks and you don't see any improvement, that's when you escalate. I would escalate to the topical steroid. And then more moderate to severe, that's where we definitely need a biologic. So meaning that you've tried all the skincare, the fragrance-free skincare, you've tried the topical steroids, and you are still flaring. That's when it's time for a biologic. And it is still important to continue with the skincare routines when you are on that biologic. Some people, I have had a couple of patients who are like, oh, I am on this biologic now. I can use Bath and Body Works or, fragrance products. And really, your goal is to reduce your symptoms. So if you reduce your symptoms, then maybe you can stretch out that biologic and maybe not need to do it every 2 weeks. You could do it once a month or once every 6 weeks.
Okay, real quick. Raise your hand if you have dealt with active instability. If you have ever opened a jar of retinol cream and smelt an off odor or noticed your formula went dark brown, chances are you are dealing with active instability. It's never fun when the formula you've been working on goes south and the due date is only days away. That's why we've encapsulated the trickier ingredients to work with so you can kick the stability struggle to the curb. From retinol to vitamin C, we make it easier to work with those ingredients that typically give you that 3 p.m. headache. The cellulose shell shields the active from outside exposure. Things like air and light that are likely to cause active breakdown, giving you the power to create stable and effective formulas without the trial and error. Ready to quickly create effective skincare formulas? Discover Tagra's Cellucaps line by going to tagra.com/cellucaps. So, have you encapsulated yet? Now back to the show.
Let's go into your product a little bit. we in the kind of FDA OTC world, right, there is kind of these monographed ingredients, and I believe the eczema one is a challenging area to navigate because there isn't specific to eczema, it's just specific to kind of like barrier function, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
so I believe right now, the FDA monographed ingredients are really like the colloidal oatmeal, right?
Yeah. Colloidal oatmeal, petrolatum. Yes. Yes.
And so the approach, you worked with a very talented and former guest cosmetic chemist who helped you to kind of evaluate and look at potentially other ingredients that aren't identified. So talk to me a little bit about the formula that you use and kind of what you found to be supportive ingredients that maybe aren't quote unquote active but do play a critical role in supporting eczema relief.
Right. So I had the pleasure of meeting Mark back in 2019 when I was thinking about, building a brand. And he was so sweet to hop on the phone with me and just kind of talk, because I told him, I was like, I am looking to create this alternative to topical steroids. And at the time I was pregnant, so it wasn't really the time to start building. But in 2021, I started doing my research, and I said I wanted a product that had seaweed in it, because seaweed is a hydrator and it also helps with inflammation. And we now know that part of eczema and this kind of immune dysregulation, there is a dysbiosis in the skin's microbiome, where there is Staph aureus, which is a bacteria that we all have on our skin.
Sure.
However, people with eczema tend to have more of it. And
Yeah.
so the seaweed actually helps decrease adherence of the Staph aureus to the
Okay.
skin.
Yeah.
And then vitamin B12 came up as an emerging ingredient in the treatment of eczema, which also helps with inflammation. And so I said, we need to put that in there. Little did I know that more so than it being a natural alternative to topical steroids, the color is actually what everybody just loves.
Yeah.
Um, so we have that, and then also inulin, which is a prebiotic that feeds the good bacteria on the skin and helps with that dysbiosis. So I'm no formulator. Mark is the formulator, and
Yeah.
after like 20 iterations, because after each one he would send me a sample, I'd try it, I'd be like, no, that's too sticky,
Yeah.
no, it's not moisturizing enough,
Sure.
no, and then finally we landed on one.
Yeah, and you and I discussed this, that part of what your focus was too was that this was a form that was barrier supportive, right, in emulsion, but that it didn't compromise consistency of use, right? So in looking at alternatives, right, when you walk down the, like, let's say you go down the baby aisle in Target and you're looking at something for diaper rash, right, which
Mm-hmm.
can also be applied for eczema, right? You're
Mm-hmm.
looking at
Mm-hmm.
these like very occlusive, kind of like very much Vaseline, and they can be a little bit difficult to use, right? Because you're expecting
Right.
a child that's moving around and rubbing up against the couch and whatever else
Mm-hmm.
to be
Mm-hmm.
using this product that is just aggressively oil, is going to stain it, maybe doesn't feel good, right? And so
Right.
part of the process for you had mentioned, was also to create a texture that was approachable and that you could use or your child could use, right? That it had that universality to it.
Right, because, at the end of the day, eczema is hereditary,
Yeah.
right? So if mom or dad has eczema, more than likely baby will have it, brother or sister will have it. So it is a family product. And so one of the complaints that kids have all the time is that, oh, it's too greasy, I don't like
Yeah. Yeah.
the feel. But this has like a nice soft buttery feel to it,
Yeah.
so anyone would really like to use it, the kids or the grown-ups in the house.
And so, in closing and kind of thinking about things that you're wanting to share to the industry, what are some misconceptions about eczema that you want retired?
I don't want anybody to come after me for this, but
I don't have a big enough following for that, Jemila.
So, I do want to kind of touch on food and eczema. Okay.
Yeah.
So there is this kind of misconception well, actually, it's not a misconception. There's some truth to it.
Sure.
Certain foods can worsen eczema.
Yep.
Does it mean that it's a true food allergy? Or when I say true food allergy, IgE mediated, meaning that you're experiencing hives, vomiting, difficulty breathing, you need an EpiPen, you're going to the emergency room. No, it is not.
Yeah.
So if we remove that food from the diet, yes, eczema might get better, but if you go back to reintroduce the food, you're creating or promoting actually a true IgE mediated life-threatening food allergy. So I typically like to say, yes, there might be foods that worsen your eczema. Eat them in moderation. Don't completely remove them from the diet.
Yeah.
Because if you do, then you are truly promoting a true food allergy where you would need an EpiPen for. So,
and I think, I challenged you when we spoke last. I said, do you think there's ever, going to be a cure, right? Something that you can just take a pill or put something on and you're going to be all symptom resolution of all symptoms. And you said no, right? You said no, this is unfortunately a lifelong
yes.
illness.
There are some children that grow out of it. Majority of children do grow out of it by age 6, 7, 8.
Yeah.
But then there are, like me, I still have it. And it is something that is embedded into my life, my routine. Sure. Once you get out of the shower, moisturize. You know what your triggers and your irritants are. Even though we have these biologics, which are wonderful, wonderful drugs, you still have to take it either every 2 weeks, once a month. You still have to take it. So unfortunately, I don't think that we're there yet.
Sure.
But I'm sure with time, maybe in the future, but we're not there yet.
Yeah. And even just touching upon, when you say some children do grow out of it, do you think they maybe just develop the pattern of care that allows them to decrease the prevalence of the symptoms?
That's a really good point. So, with the moisturizing, you are strengthening the skin barrier, right? So you're strengthening the skin barrier. Those holes might be closing up, and so yes, you develop the pattern early. So the more you do all the good things, fragrance free, moisturize, the more you do all the good things, the less often you have the symptoms.
Yes.
So,
great.
yeah.
And how have you found let's phrase this differently. What does building trust in a condition-driven brand require?
It requires a lot of credibility, number one. Credibility. It requires testing, right? And showing up. And showing up on podcasts like this to tell the story. To tell the story. And so credibility, testing, and, just showing up, showing your face, as the brand founder. I think that's what you need.
Awesome. Well, speaking of showing up, where can our listeners find you and Ocean Olive? And what would you like to share with someone navigating eczema?
I'd like to share with someone navigating eczema that, yes, eczema can be an interruption in your life, but don't let it be. Lead with joy. There are things out there to help, right? And there are steps to take to improve the eczema. Yeah. And specifically for moms, you are doing amazing. Okay.
Awesome. I love that.
Yes.
I love that.
Mhm.
And they can find your product online, right?
Yes, online, www.ocean-olive.com. We are on just direct to consumer right now.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. I know that our eczema listeners will love to hear about this, and hopefully we'll get some anecdotes coming in about how well the product has served them. So I thank you.
Thanks so much for having me, Jennifer.